Donald Trump has the lowest approval rating of any president on his last day in office. This was after he arguably caused an attack on finalizing the vote where he lost. This finalization of the vote that happened January 6th was officiated by the vice president, who had to publicly acknowledge that he was not going to be vice president anymore and had no ability himself independently to interfere with the vote being certified. And even though others in the room were permitted to try to interfere with it, it had no hope of ever going through and wasted time. This grandstanding behavior is done as a way to be obnoxious. Donald Trump's presidential job approval ratings from June of 2020 were 39%. Now, I don't know if you understand that. That's among all people who vote. That was also done as approval ratings among Republicans, among Democrats, among undecideds, among people who were simply able to register to vote because they didn't have to have registered by then necessarily, in some areas, let's say, for argument. What that means is that at that moment, he could not have won an election. Donald Trump's approval rating by vote in 2016 was below 50%. Let me repeat that. Donald Trump won an election due to our system using the Electoral College as a way to moderate and make more fair and balanced our election by making sure that states with fewer people in them aren't essentially ignored for an election for the president. But the majority of people who voted against him. He has never had enough people want to vote for him to really be elected, unless we just rely on the Electoral College and its quirks, which is not the most likely outcome. In the 2020 election, Donald Trump lost the popular vote and the Electoral College vote. And he lost Arizona by a fairly large margin, and Maricopa County specifically by more of a margin, not less. Let's review. January 5th, before the day the shit hit the fan, Donald Trump had a 42% approval rating. By January 15th, it was under 30%. It was 29 or 28%, depending on where you look. I'm using the high number here, 29%, which means twice as many people wanted him to leave office as the number of people who wanted him to stay. By definition, having 30% of the vote or less means the only way you could win an election is if the next runner-up got less votes. And by January 16th, on one poll, the highest ranking I could find was 38%, and I'm being generous rounding up. It was 37 point something. He has never had, nor could he have right now, an approval rating that would let him win an election based on popular vote. By definition, if you force a revote, not a recount, but a revote in Maricopa County, only to make the decision, he would still lose. And it should be pointed out that the most likely outcome, if you could invalidate the election, is the actual procedure in place isn't to just give Donald Trump the election. If you're claiming the election was fraudulent or screwed up or had anomalies in it or anything else after the fact this many months, there's no point in using the old numbers back then when the approval ratings have changed and you would make it even more unfair. The most likely outcome is the following. Biden and Harris would be declared not to be currently standing president and vice president. Number 2, Nancy Pelosi would be running the country or someone like her for the election. Next, all of the states will be told that you have to do the election over again to simply get rid of the problem, because counting votes from months ago, we're at, God, what day is it again? It's June. Yeah, it's June 4th. There is no reason on June 4th to assume that people would vote the same way they did before. If you wanted to just do recounts all the time, you'd get the same result. You'd have to find an anomaly like California saying that their computer system counted everything wrong, and they found millions of ballots that are anomalous that could be just county elections. The most likely thing you'd find is that the elections for a particular district would show anomalies for someone unrelated to Trump because someone would have simply faked a bunch of ballots and written in the wrong information. That would be the most likely outcome. So you'd have to just start over again and say, okay, let's just do the vote over again. It would have to be major. And it would either be a single state or just a county. If it was Maricopa County, those people would be allowed to vote today. And Maricopa County shows among Republicans who are given the option to vote for Trump or for anybody else. That was the wording. And also for Trump or for Pelosi. When they were pushed that far, they said they'd vote for Pelosi more often by a small margin, 52% or something. No, I'm not kidding. There enough people in Maricopa County are mad at Donald Trump now that they would pick Pelosi. This is not something you want to revote on. That's why they're not demanding it. They only demanded a revote until they started doing their own polls. If you're not aware of how I know about that, this is a scuttlebutt posting by a company run by the Republican National Committee that found out that Trump would cause them to lose to Pelosi, so they don't even want to talk about it publicly. So what would happen? You'd have a revote. Trump would lose again. But let's talk about Arizona. 3.4 million votes were cast out of the 4.3 million, suspicious number, that were registered voters. About 20% or more of the population of the state of Arizona didn't bother voting because they figured the election would just go the way they wanted. That's the usual reason people don't vote. They either decide my vote isn't relevant because everything's going fine, or my vote doesn't count because I can't win. But either way, 20% of the population or more in Arizona decided not to vote. That's the same ratio as Maricopa County. They had a slightly higher number, but only slightly, that voted out of the people who registered, which means you can either claim 20% of the ballots were hidden, lost, expunged, destroyed by the evil Democrats, or 20% of the population in the state is lazy. This isn't much different than other states, by the way. Biden got 1 million votes, a little over that, out of the state's 1.67 million votes that he got just in Maricopa County. 62% of his votes came from there. Donald Trump got 60% of his votes from Maricopa County. He got 995,000 out of the state's 1.6 million Trump votes. And that means that the ratio matches the rest of the state, so it doesn't show a juggling of numbers to keep Trump from being elected. It shows the same ratio of laziness and the same ratio, approximately, that Maricopa County accounts for 60% of your win, around 60-61%. The numbers are so close that it doesn't show an anomaly against Trump, except Maricopa County voters voting against him. Donald Trump lost the state by about 10,000 votes. But in Maricopa County, he lost by 45,000. Well, that's an anomaly. But the current polling shows that he would still lose. Generalized polling in Maricopa County shows that he would get 30% of the vote. That's still not him winning. He can't win if you do the election today, and he can't win no matter how you do the numbers because it was a ridiculously large ratio. You'd have to show not, I only need 11,000 votes. No, when he was on the phone. He would have to win Maricopa County by contradicting 45,000 votes. That's a lot of goddamn votes. And there's only the ballots that are being brought up as a comparison of an error or some anomaly in Maricopa County are listed as being a very tiny number compared to that, so it wouldn't actually change the outcome. The U.S. Constitution, I stated in a previous video, forbids the Supreme Court from overruling these outcomes simply because each state gets to pick their presidential winner. They can ignore the entire population, but every state has a law against it. And every state approved their outcomes, including Arizona approving Maricopa County. the ratio of loss was ridiculously higher for Maricopa County compared to the entire state. And it also showed another anomaly. A majority of people in the state did vote Republican, straight tickets, and then voted against Trump. Again, a majority of people don't like Trump in general, and a majority of Republicans in Arizona don't like Trump in Maricopa County. And when people bring up a complaint of some anomaly or fraud publicly, including every lawyer specifically for Trump's side, when they go into court, first of all, they ask for an anonymous, they want a closed session so they don't have to have anything public. And then when they can't get that done, they have to state in court publicly, for the record, I am not claiming fraud because I don't have any proof of it. And there is no fraud. They actually state positively there is no fraud. Why? Well, they're being tricked into it. No. The reason they're in court saying that is because as an officer of the court, if they claim to have evidence and don't present it, they're withholding evidence. If they claim fraud is factual but won't present evidence and have stated publicly they have it, they're guilty of withholding evidence and or disrupting the process of justice. If you're an officer of the court, you are duty bound to help solve a problem, especially if you claim that it exists. And ironically, Giuliani and the others would be claimed to be part of a conspiracy in favor of Biden if they didn't present evidence. So they have to state they don't have evidence when they don't. And they have to state that they're not making a claim of fraud when it's not really a claim of fraud. This is ignored by people who claim fraud. Someone asked if Biden actually lost, but he was put in place or acknowledged on June 6th, but he did really lose, and we had solid, irrefutable proof, that would seem to change things. That's unprecedented. Not really. What would happen? It'd certainly be an interesting scenario. So let's bring that up. I've already told you. The scenario is, A, they put Trump in charge. No. If you're claiming an election is invalid, that invalidates his votes too. That's the claim. It has to be invalidated. So you'd have to do another vote. He would lose. Also, a side effect is technically Biden and Harris could technically be removed from power and you'd end up with Pelosi running the country legitimately as the president. Or someone like her. The whole point of people appointing someone from their party, if they're president, if possible, to be the next runner-up, if you remove the president and vice president, that's why nobody wants to do that. Well, we just want to put Donald Trump in power. Well, you can't. You can't have the Supreme Court do it because even if they said that the vote was, the election in 2020 was screwed up, all they could do is say you have to do it over again. Period. It should be pointed out the GOP hired Ben Cotton of Cypher to do a cyber audit, but he hasn't agreed to keep the information secure or private about you from Arizona. Just saying. And it should be pointed out again, even the people who say there was fraud state that there wasn't any when it comes to them being able to be charged with not lying, but withholding evidence. If they had evidence, they would have presented it. They haven't. The next thing is, the best scenario that you could come up with is a redo of the election where Trump would lose anyway. Trump never won the majority of the vote, and normally, when the majority of people vote against you, you lose with the Electoral College, and it worked exactly that way this time. Maricopa County cannot swing this any more than any other state. You'd have to swing all of the states. Many, many states showed Republicans voting against the president and in favor of every other Republican because they hated him. Maricopa County showing 4 times the negative outcome of the state is significant. No, that's not an anomaly either because other parts of the state overwhelmingly approved of him and compensated for it, but only partially. And it should be pointed out that Jorgensen helped Trump lose Maricopa County because Jorgensen got 31,000 votes and Trump lost by 45,000. He lost the state by 10,000. He lost Maricopa by 45,000. And he has nobody to blame but Jorgensen, maybe. Himself, obviously. Or maybe us voters that have the right to fire the president. Which is something the vice president had to acknowledge overtly on the 6th and did so, which is his fucking job. And a group of people outside the building tried to kill him for it.